Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're well. As you know, at the beginning of November, I popped up to Chester to sit in, see what was going on with the election petition trial to do with the Runorn Helsby by-election. Here, of course, is a picture of myself and Graham Moore outside of the court after everything had been dealt with. Now, on Graham's channel last night, he did a show where he went through the cost order that he issued to do with the obvious bit, the money, to do with the Runorn Helsby petition trial. And obviously, any time now, hopefully it won't be too long, we will find out exactly what's going on. Now, one thing I haven't done up to this point is told you exactly verbatim what happened in the courtroom on each of the 3 days. And I think enough time has gone by now where I can do a live and let you know what's been going on or what went on at the time, particularly for those that didn't miss it. These are the notes that I took on the actual day in question or days. And what I will do is go through them all day by day. It was a 3-day trial. And, you know, day 3 was slightly shorter because all the business really had been dealt with in the first 2 days. So here we go. So on day 1, which was the Monday, I travelled up there on the Sunday by train, by the way. We all went to the court. And outside, there was a fair amount of support for Graham already. And there's one important thing to point out. It did show public interest because the court was packed on each of the 3 days. And what there was the court manager outside giving everybody a raffle ticket. You felt like you won the lottery, you know, and it was a case of the lower numbers who got there first got to get a seat in the trial. Now, when you went into the courtroom, it's like one of these big courts, you know, like you see on Rumpole of the Bailey or something like that. It was quite spectacular, really. To behold, and you had the judges with the wigs, the lawyers and everything else. It was exactly as you'd imagine it. In the pit, right in front, like in the middle of the court, you had the side where you had the team for Sarah Poachin, who, by the way, never showed her face, and you had the team that was representing the returning officer. Sarah Poachin obviously had her barrister there, and the King's Counsel was somebody called Timothy Straker, and he has got 40 years of experience at dealing with things such as election petitions. And one of the things to understand is that he is retained by pretty much all of the people within the system. If there is an election problem, they roll out Timothy Straker. Now, that's unfair in itself because that expertise isn't made available to anyone else. And also, Timothy Straker comes with a very hefty price tag. You were talking literally thousands of pounds. With regard to press, i.e. the media that was in there wasn't anybody really. There was one person I clocked on the first day, and as it turns out, they were a member of the Associated Press. And what they do, they type it up, dump it in a pool, and then other media outlets can use their work. And what we found was there was one piece that was released that wasn't too bad, actually. And then the rest of them were biased. They just picked out the worst bits, you know, and tried to make Graham look like someone he actually wasn't. When we got into the court and the judges took their seats, they explained what was going to happen to Graham. The fact he was a litigant in person, that's one thing to remember. He was representing you. He was representing everything by himself. He didn't have a team of expensive lawyers around him. They explained to him what was going to happen, how they were going to do it, and the fact that he wouldn't be aware of certain procedures because he was a litigant in person. They would do their best to assist him and help him if he needed it. When that was done, Graham was then sworn in as a witness. As obviously he's not a lawyer, not a barrister. He was sworn in as a witness, and he went first. Now, they spoke about an expert witness, which they were going to call later on. And also they were talking about introducing a letter into evidence because, one of the things to do with the election interference was the fact that Graham's election material wasn't delivered by the Royal Mail. And there are other things coming out about that. And Graham had a letter about the whole thing where his stuff was found with a little post-it note saying, "Do not deliver." And the judges said, well, if you want us to consider this, then we're probably going to have to adjourn proceedings. And he said, no, let's just get this out of the way. One of the other things in the preamble at the beginning was the fact that a plan was suddenly introduced by Mr. Straker, and this was a plan of the election count area from the Runorn Helsby by-election, and we broke for probably 10 minutes while Graham had a look, and they decided what they wanted to do. And he spoke about that with Steve, who was a great help to him throughout. When everyone come back in, Mr. Justice Spencer, after Graham was sworn in, as I said, acted as, well, the lawyer really, and extracted the answers to questions from Graham, run through his, statement and evidence and skeleton argument, and extracted the information from him. One of the things that Graham spoke about was the fact that, the English Constitution Party, what they stand for, the English Constitution, the sick, the disabled, the needy, people, constituents who actually need someone to represent them. They spoke about Cheshire Police. Some answers came out there. And the fact that, the leaflets weren't delivered. That's one of the big things. They spoke about what triggered the trial in the first place. The fact that the point that Graham got 50 votes now and 50 votes in another area 9 years ago with totally different people, the odds are staggering, 1,000,000 to 1. Spoke a little bit about the fraud, where, like, if you look at my notes, I just flick the corner there, and you've got a pile of votes for one party, stick one for one on top and one for the other on the bottom. They spoke about Doncaster in 2009. There was some issue there, which, was brought up, which again really drove home the fact that there could be a bit of a problem. Graham was then cross-examined by Mr. Straker, and they spoke about the plan of the election hearing, which I told you about. They talked about the count. They talked about his nomination, how he is nominated to stand as an MP, or how anybody is nominated to stand as an MP. And one thing that's very important as well is the fact that anyone that wants to stand as an MP has to pay a £500 deposit, and that comes out of the coffers of the party that you're standing for, or if you're an independent, your own pocket. So if there is a situation where fraud occurred, it's not only the fraud itself, it's all the members of the party that have paid out to help you stand. There was talk about the 50 votes. Was it predetermined that he was going to get 50 votes? And also, was it a deliberate decision, malicious intent, and oversight? We don't know, because that was the whole point of an election petition trial, to determine and uncover the fraud. And also, very telling as well, this margin of 6 votes that Sarah Poachin won by, something like that hasn't happened in well over 100 years. So that really tells you as well. Graham was asked about a thing called the mini count method. If you haven't heard of that, that comes out a bit later. And I did a full video on this a couple of days ago, actually, where I go through the method to a degree. I spoke about verification of the ballot papers. And Timothy Straker, I thought at this point, tried to keep catching Graham out, kept trying to ask leading questions, trying to repeat the same thing, but in a different way, you know, all the usual tropes that they do. Graham weren't falling for it. What they try to do as well is try and get an idea when Graham saw or where he got the idea and saw, you know, evidence of the fraud that this whole trial is about. And they got to a point in time. And also, you know, the trays he could see, the bundles he could see. And Graham also talked about Fabian's, talked about the Cheshire Police harassment. And at that point, there was a big round of applause from everybody in the court, and got a bollocking for that, got told to behave ourselves. Graham said that in the event of a recount, he would expect Sarah Pochin to win by a lot more. That's something. At the end, there's a statistician who was involved with the Royal College of Statisticians that Graham called as a witness, who testified to the fact that this business of only getting 50 votes twice in two separate elections, nearly a decade apart, highly, highly improbable. Something obviously smells. And the fact that there's only 6 votes as a majority, you know, could something have gone wrong? Listen, what you've got to understand at this point is that if Graham got 50 votes, but Sarah Pochin's majority was 20,000 as opposed to 6, there wouldn't have been a petition. Anyway, we're moving to day 2. And day 2 was better for me because I had trouble hearing at the back, and I ended up with headphones the second day, and I could hear everything a lot more clearly. Some video evidence was played by Graham, and they were talking about that initially. And what Graham showed, he had 2 videos, one of which was a couple of minutes long, and it showed a close-up of one of the counting agents thumbing the corner of the votes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. Now, what the problem is there is the fact that Stephen Young, the returning officer, came up on video and said there would be a full ballot recount because of how close it was. Thumbing the votes is not a full ballot recount. That's what you have to understand. Very important. Graham explained the difference between a ballot recount and thumbing, which is what we saw. There was a little bit of talk about what Graham was saying and what the judges saw on the video. One could see they were thumbing, and the other thought they were splitting them apart. So there was a little bit of a difference of opinion there. Graham said that, you know, the remedy that they're asking for is a full individual ballot recount in a separate location. You know, that is the remedy for this. Graham also pointed out as well that at the point the recount was declared and the point the result was declared, not enough time passed for there to be a full recount, proper full recount. It just, you know, doesn't make any sense from that point of view. There was a little bit of query about where the clip came from that Graham had. One was from the media, which was spliced together with a thing of Nigel Farage arriving, which makes for a very good distraction. That's something. And he said, ignore the distraction. Now, at this point, Valerie Phillips took the stand. Valerie, she's a lovely lady. She actually stayed in the same hotel as me, and we had breakfast together on a couple of days. She was one of the counting agents for Graham at the election, and she is another person that saw the fact there were 2 bundles of votes plus a few extras, which in everybody's minds, accounted for more than 50 votes. And she explained what her job was. She explained that she'd been at counts before, or a count before, and knew the job basically, and explained what she was doing. She talked a bit about another count at St Helens, and the fact that some parts of the count appear to be out of sight. Val claims that she saw the more votes, as we've discussed, for the English Constitution Party on a table called CS8, which is counting station 8, and she was standing close enough to it to be able to see what was going on. And the tray which the votes were on had Moore written on it, as in Graham Moore. And the bundles that were there certainly differed from the results. They spoke again about, what kind of count was happening, the aforementioned thumbing of the votes. And at a point in time, they decided to leave because they could see what was going on. Anyway, Timothy Straker cross-examined her. And they talked a little bit about the timing of things, where she was sitting, who with, and what access to seating or movement there was, and where she was, predominantly around counting station 8, where all of this stuff was, on. They talked a little bit about the chatter, a bit of the old bunnying around the election tables, and also about the outer circle of tables compared with the inner circle, the differences between the two. Talked a little bit about Val's role as a count agent. And Val said that basically one of her jobs is to make sure that everything is above board, and if she sees anything untoward, put a stop to it. But she could only see what was going on the outer edge. And one of the things that came up was the fact that why didn't anybody complain at the time? Because as came out later, there is a procedure for complaints. But as Graham points out, the ultimate complaint is an election petition hearing. And the other important thing to understand as well is the returning officer has the power, even after the event, if there's any abnormalities, to say, right, we're going to have a recount. Never did. There was appeals before this at the cost of many thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money to put a stop to this. This whole charade could have been ended any time if the returning officer said, recount. If Sarah Poaching said, I have clean hands, at any time. But we've gone through all this. That was all of Graham's evidence. So we had the statistician, Nigel. We had Val Phillips. We had the video footage showing the thumbing of the votes. And it goes over to Timothy Straker. Now, where you have effectively defence and you have prosecution, or you have a petitioner and you have a respondent, it sounds very adversarial, doesn't it? But it's not adversarial. It's something very much in the public interest we need to get to the bottom of. Now, Mr. Straker called somebody called Penny Housley, and she was one of the deputy returning officers, we'll say DROs, and she had first-hand knowledge of what was going on, on the night in question. But the statement which she was reading from was adopted as hers. It actually belonged to somebody else, one of the other returning agents or returning officers who wasn't there. I think they were on holiday. There was a little bit about her background. She's employed by Cheshire Council, and she was running the election at a Halton Borough Council as the deputy returning officer. She's been working in this sort of line for at least a decade, so very experienced in the system. And she worked on elections throughout her career, and she acted in this election. They talked about the procedure involved in, counting agents, how many counting agents, who is allowed into the count, what candidates are allowed into a count, what friends are allowed with them, what counting agents are allowed with them. And apparently Graham was allowed 8 and he turned up with 5. Well, it's more than enough really for one candidate, isn't it? They're saying that the boxes with all the ballot papers in were sealed at 10 p.m. For transport, obviously, to the counting area where they were. They referred to the plan, the layout and everything, and then they went into saying what a mini count actually is. And to summarize, she said that they divide it up into various sections across 10 tables, saves a bit of time. The ballot papers themselves, they try and minimize the amount of movement across the tables over that period of time. They discussed who could come in and who couldn't. The counting staff, holding bays, deliveries, security presence. These are all parts of the plan and all part of the overall layout of the night. And then they had a look at the video footage that Mr. Straker revealed, actually pulled out and spoke about, what she could see at various points and try and explain it. What her job really was to protect the system that was in place. She was saying that the training was given to counting staff and counting agents. The majority of the staff were Halton Council employees, and they were pulled in from other places as well, all over the place. There was a little bit of talk about political affiliation, because anybody that acts as a count agent has to declare that they're not actively involved in the political campaign, because it would disqualify them. But you don't talk about political affiliation. Are you Labour? Are you Tory? Are you Reform? Are you a Fabian? Are you this? Are you that? There's no talk about that. And you are taking the person's word for it to a large degree. They spoke about the bundles because, as you remember, Graham said he saw 2 bundles of 50 plus a few others. Now, this was the point where I thought, well, surely this proves it, because she turned around and said they don't use bundles of 50. They haven't done for years. What they do, in fact, is bundle them in 10s and then bundle those 10s in piles of 100 and count them. So if Graham saw 2 bundles plus a few more, that still doesn't equate to 50 votes, does it? They talked a little bit about errors in the votes, what happens with those and how they're dealt with, and talk of a big mixing box which everything goes into at one point. They talk about the verification of the postal votes on the actual count night, but I've seen evidence since with postal votes in other councils, and they're dealt with prior to that point, so that is a little bit confusing. They spoke about the point where a full recount of the ballot papers was ordered and what actually happens when a full recount is ordered. I spoke about adjudication as well. What happens when, there is a problem with the ballot paper? How is it adjudicated? What happens to the ballot paper? Spoke about there were 12 trays on the outer tables, and, votes for Graham were put in a tray, and, how do you determine how many votes he got? And apparently the count supervisor, or I think they're called the head numerator, is another thing, has a spreadsheet, and it's purely a mathematical exercise where all of the number crunching gets done and you determine who got what votes, and the result is declared off of that spreadsheet. They talked about the trestle tables, the counting stations, and the journey of Graham's votes across the whole system as well. And also, the sleight of hand where do you spot it? How is it spotted? Or more importantly, how is it concealed? At this point, Graham cross-examined her, talked about, the identification that was on the actual tray where his votes were, talked about the bundle sizes, the difference between 50 and 10, and he actually showed a bundle of 100 election leaflets and said, could you estimate how big 10 would be, for example? They showed a video again about the ballot sizes, but one of the things was trying to determine the true number. It was determined that many of the people at that count were not her actual colleagues, and again, as I said earlier, they were pulled in from everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Spoke about the aforementioned declaration about their political affiliations, and who trains these people. Turns out she did. The judge stepped in at one point and asked about, political affiliations again, and also what happens with disputes with the ballots if there is a problem. And apparently a very incendiary remark was made on the night by Mr. Young, where he said it's not up for debate, which didn't go down too well, apparently, among everybody. There was discussion about the sleight of hand, with the whole vote counts and stacking them. And she said that with the amount of people, it just couldn't have happened the way he said it. They discussed where, it could have happened. And she kept maintaining that it would never have got through any kind of check. People would have seen it. The witness stood down then. That was the only witness that Timothy Straker called, and he put his closing arguments across and basically did his hardest to destroy Graham and his credibility, and said that, none of this really, and I'm paraphrasing here, makes any sense. We move into day 3, and this is where Graham gives his closing submissions. When we first got there, Graham pulled up a video again, just as a reminder to people that, funny business did go on, and here it is. Have a look. That's the tack he was taking with that. And also he spoke about the trigger point. Why was this election petition bought? And it was the 50 votes again. Remember, 50 votes in Tooting in 2016, 50 votes now. Both high-profile elections. For those of you that don't know, Tooting was when Sadiq Khan stood down and went for the Mayor of London post he holds now. There was the issue of the 6 votes. 50 votes for Graham and only a 6-vote majority after a recount. Something doesn't quite add up there. And again, they mentioned if there was more, then there wouldn't have been a recount. There wouldn't have been a petition hearing. It just wouldn't have been worth actually bringing it across. They spoke about an election at Southend where Graham stood, why no petition was given there. And he said, well, we were a new party. And it was different circumstances. It was during lockdown. So, while it was an election, it wasn't an election in the true sense of the word. Graham spoke again about the English Constitution Party, what they represent, and spoke about the fact that whips within parties are not constitutional. You're supposed to represent the people as an MP, not the party. So whips are just not a done thing. Spoke about Hallsbury's Laws of England, mentioned the sanctity of the freedom of elections and the fact that the English Constitution is God's law, and God's law is the English Constitution. There can be no higher. Spoke about the first statute of Westminster and the fact it's still active. Spoke about the Bill of Rights and the European Convention of Human Rights. The Bill of Rights and the first statute of Westminster contain everything to do with our rights to free elections and what should be happening in Parliament, and all very much valid today. It spoke about, and this is important, if an election is undermined, then Parliament is undermined. There can be no parliamentary sovereignty if an election is undermined, because at the end of the day, our sovereignty is lent to them for a period of time, and then they give it back. That is the whole idea of the thing. Graham was called a lowly person by Mr. Straker, and he made reference to that. There was the point that at any time, the returning officer could have dealt with this in another way, saving all this time, all these appeals, all this money. And also the fact that since 1275, this has been a massive problem throughout the whole of history. Problems with elections, election integrity. And again, it could have all been saved. Graham made a point of saying that he's not political, he's not a politician, he's just a normal working class bloke. And he made reference to an election that George Galloway stood in, and he lost. And it was quite obvious that George Galloway had the election taken from him, and Graham wrote a statement for George Galloway. George Galloway didn't pursue it because of the fear that comes with all of this of bankruptcy, because all of this costs thousands. They spoke a little bit about what relief Graham is seeking, and it was a full independent recount in an independent location. And Graham spoke about the trust that he holds with the High Court judges. You know, that's what it's all about. Graham said he saw more votes than he actually got, and said that this whole thing shouldn't be adversarial because it is in the public interest that we have free and fair elections. And it was a case of who did it. Don't know. You know, that's what this petition has got to find out. Spoke about the witness that we spoke about from day 2 is trained to protect the system, you know, the counting system from, you know, outside scrutiny, and the fact that it was organised chaos. They took umbrage at the word chaos, so we went with organised chaos. The judge had a query about Graham's statement. When and where did he see the 50 votes that he thought he saw? And Graham verified what counting station. He also said as well, which is important, that the reality of the situation on the night is vastly different to, you know, witness testimony and looking at videos and count, you know, plans and everything out. They also determine that if the count is erroneous, then it is a breach of Graham's rights. And if it's not erroneous, then it isn't. Spoke about the basis of his complaint with regard to the police and the post office. That's not over, not by a long shot. And also spoke about the exposure that he got in the media. Well, he didn't get any exposure in the media. He got exposure from me. He got exposure from LSB Productions. He got exposure from Sean Atwood and a few other YouTubers. And also, if you look at the support he got in Runorn Helsby as well, it doesn't equate to 50 votes. So again, something's wrong there. Spoke about the method of counting, the fact that things were flipped and not actually, you know, fully counted. What you've got to imagine is the ballot papers with 15 people on are this big, so they need looking at properly. Graham said again that he saw more than 50, and the fact that a formal objection wasn't lodged on the night, because the place to lodge a formal objection is an election petition trial if a recount or the right thing wasn't done. Now, this is very important. The judge, well, both judges actually complimented Graham on his conduct and said he made a good account of himself. And also, they were completely satisfied of Graham's passion and the fact that he had a genuine belief that something was wrong here and needed to bring it to the court, bring it to the judicial system to put it where it needs to be. And if nothing else, Graham achieved that goal, saying, you know, there is a problem here. This needs addressing. Here it is. Here's my evidence. It's down to you to make the decision. And they said very much that it is in the public interest. And what you've got to think as well, Graham is never going to win this election. That's not what it's about. It's about the sanctity, the purity of our elections, nothing else. At the end, they said that there's going to be a reserve judgment, which basically means no judgment was passed on that day. That means they got to take it away and think about it. In many circumstances, that's a good thing because it means they've got to give it some more thought. It's not just a case of shut the door, that's it, done, you know. So that was a good sign. Before everything was over and done with, they spoke a little bit about cost orders, which Graham put in. You go and have a look on his Rumble channel. He put something in yesterday. And also, Mr. Straker, Timothy Straker, rose to apologise for any perception of ill feeling to do with anything he might have said, like lowly person, which might have caused offence. There was a little bit of talk about in what form the judgment will be handed down, but unfortunately, no talk of when. So we are still waiting. So that, my friends, is 3 days in a court, and I've done my best to relay it to you as thoroughly as I can, and that's my little notes there. Now, as soon as we get a result, I will tell you as soon as I can. I will let you know what's happening, and hopefully have Graham on for an interview and go through everything. There's a big danger he could be bankrupt if he loses. That's a very big danger. So we need to make sure that the cost order, whatever he puts in, the judges side with him and see that it is in the public interest, because that will have a great effect with regard to protecting him. In any event, we need to keep his GoFundMe ticking over, which he's paid a large chunk of court fees out of already. Well, that's it. I need your help as well. I did a video earlier on. This is the thumbnail for it. I need help, and it's all to do with a local issue, to do with our local council and some of the things that they're going to be doing. So I'd appreciate when it pops up on the end screen here, if you can go and have a look at that. I'd be grateful. Please, as always, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share my stuff. And as always, I look forward to talking to you soon. Toodaloo.